Hello everyone, Sandra here, and today I want to, share some tips, tricks, and advice for new Guild Wars 1, or Guild Wars Reforged as it might be getting called now, players. This is going to be adapted from an article I wrote about 5 years ago for my blog, so I will include a link to that in the description. There's a couple of reasons why you might want to check out that specifically, one of which is I do have a lot of links to the wiki in that, as well as there will be some, I'm not going to talk about the story, but there's going to be some like tangential things that'll come up. I'm going to map around places, so you'll see my map, which is going to have places uncovered. So if you want to try to avoid that stuff, the article would be another place to go check and look into that. First things that I want to touch on. By the way, if you want to hide your UI, Control-Shift-H toggles it on and off. And you can also temporarily hide it for taking screenshots by holding down Shift before you hit print screen, which is the default screenshot button. So that's some useful immediate tips. But the first thing that I want to mention is the wiki. The player wiki it's first of all, it's hosted by ArenaNet, so there's no annoying ads or things like that clogging up bandwidth and making the pages laggy and ugly. So, and it's also really well done. Players have done a great job of curating it. And if you bring up the help menu, which the shortcut key is F10, but it is under the menu, under help, right down here. And if you go to that, there's a lot of things here that links to the pages in the wiki. So this is going to be quests that you have, skills that are on your bar, or for like your professions, skills that you've encountered recently. So Parting Gift is the current, this is a PvP thing. It's called a Flux. They change it around every month. And this is the one going on this month. So, and so it's showing the things for the different effects. One of the things here is, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but PvP has slightly different skills. The thing about guilds, ignore that. Guilds haven't had pages in quite some time. But anyway, so this is a way of doing stuff. You can see there's a thing for searching the wiki. This will bring up a web page, but it's really useful to know that that resource is there and is something that you can make use of. And it is quite useful, I think. So let's go ahead and get started with the very first question. So we're going to go to character select. I currently have the Nightfall background. So the very first question, if you're making a new character, is role-playing character or PvP-only character? So I'm going to throw a lot of words at you that I'll explain later. A role-playing character, you might call it a PvE character as well, can do PvP. There's nothing restricting them. The difference is a PvP-only character immediately is at level 20, but can only access the PvP areas. It cannot access the PvE areas. And it works a little bit differently in terms of like equipment. I haven't really messed with them a whole lot, so I don't know that much about the equipment angle. And it also can use any skill you have unlocked on your account, which I'll explain unlocking skills later. That's something that's become increasingly important as the game went on. Originally, it was only relevant for PvP characters, but they've added things that have made that important later. So you're probably going to want to make a role-playing character for obvious reasons. You're probably playing PvE, but I do think the PvP in the game is quite fun. There's a lot of good aspects to it, so it's definitely worth looking at some point in time. One of the big reasons why you might consider making a PvP-only character, and if you're making a new account, you'll have 8 character slots, so you have plenty of room to experiment around with things or use things temporarily. But one of the big reasons why you might want to make a PvP-only character is because, as I said, they start at level 20. If you have mercenary hero slots on your account, that's something that you can purchase as an addition. Heroes are a type of NPC companion that you can customize. There's another type called henchmen that you can't. We'll talk about them later as well. But the PvP-only characters, because they're at level 20, it has to be a level 20 character in order to be able to make them a hero. So it's a great way of immediately getting access to a character that you can make a hero from that profession. So maybe you want that availability. There's reasons why you might want to do that for meta builds and things like that. So that's just something to be aware of. So yeah, the other reason why you might want to do that, even if you have a character of that profession of level 20, is for obvious sort of like paradox reasons. Like, it could be done with the code, I would assume, but you can't have a character bring themselves as a hero. So, for example, if I made, I mean, I did. If I go back here, this Mesmer of mine is a mercenary hero. That means he can't bring himself along with himself. So if you want to be able to have additional copies of that particular profession with you, that you're making them into a mercenary hero, you probably want to, or like you might want to consider a PvP character. So that's a reason why you might want to make a PvP character, even just temporarily. Deleting them will not delete the mercenary hero. So that's a way that you can do that temporarily. So useful to be aware of, a little bit niche perhaps, but the next question, and the real kind of like first major one that the article itself goes into, is which campaign do you want to start in? So we have the 3 campaigns: Prophecies, Factions, and Nightfall. There is Eye of the North. That is an expansion, not a campaign. So we will touch on that a little bit later in terms of how you get there and why you might want to go there when you're able to and stuff like that. But this is the first big question that you're asked. So Prophecies has a really strong set of arguments for it, and you're going to hear different opinions from different people and where you go. I know when I've gone to, there's a Guild Wars Discord, great place to get tips and helps and stuff like that as well. But if you go there, a lot of people are going to recommend you start in Nightfall. I will touch on why, but I'm going to go through them in order. So reasons why you might want to start in Prophecies. One of the big ones is if you're playing this game for the lore. It is the first one that released. It did have, the initial things. Now, there is a point that you can reach in all of the campaigns where you can take your character to the other campaigns. So it's not like you're locked into only playing Prophecies with that character, only playing Factions, only playing Nightfall. Like, you can take your character anywhere once you reach a certain point. But, before that point, you're starting somewhere. And Prophecies has, the starting point for the lore. It's a different sort of pacing. You're going to have enough character slots that you probably are going to want to start a character in each campaign eventually anyway. So there's a decent argument for having Prophecies just be your first experience, and all that. And there's a couple of strong reasons to start in Prophecies, in my opinion, outside of lore. One is that Prophecies has the most skill quests. These are quests that give you skills for free. You can find a list of them on the wiki at the List of Skill Acquisition Quests page, which I've found particularly useful. But because of that, getting free skills is really useful. It's a little bit counterbalanced. Some of the skills might not be great, but it is a source of free skills. So the other campaigns do offer you skills for free. There's some factions quests that you can do that will give you free skills. There's some stuff in Nightfall. Nightfall has another mechanic going on to also give you skills that are sort of for free. They use an alternate currency. That'll explain when I talk about acquiring skills. I guess I should mention, this is what happens when you kind of are me and do things as you kind of go. The main topics I'm planning on talking about are choosing which campaign to start in, choosing your secondary profession, acquiring skills, making builds and being part of a team, but that's going to be more of a general sense, energy management, target prioritization, armor, making money and acquiring crafting materials, and then there's some miscellaneous other things that I want to touch on as well. So I will be talking about acquiring skills later. It's its whole section. So the skill quest is a strong argument for wanting to start in Prophecies. You can do some of them with other characters, but one of the things is when you can't do quests that are like considered before you arrive there, and there's some other random ones in Prophecies that are skill quests that are like, you have to be a Prophecies character to be able to do this quest. It's just how the thing is set up. So what you're going to definitely have a lot more free skills that you get, which especially starting out can really help. The downside is the amount of time it takes before you can get to other campaigns is definitely going to be the longest. A plus of that is it gives you more time to acquire crafting materials and things like that. One of the things that I've done here on, I did it around the time that I made this article that I'm adapting here, is I did something I called a slow playthrough, where I played through all of the campaigns. And one of the things I did with that is I wasn't going to my account's resources. I was just using the resources I got on that character. And one of the things that I noticed is The pacing of prophecies made it a lot easier to acquire the materials I needed for armor, so that slower pace is sometimes beneficial. Factions and Nightfall is a lot harder because of how much faster paced they are. So that's another potential advantage to prophecies. But I think its biggest strength is sort of the lore experience and skill quests. Factions does have Prophecy's tutorial area is beloved, but it's maybe not the most comprehensive. Factions is more comprehensive. It has more stuff going on in terms of that, but it's also maybe a bit fast, and it throws a lot of stuff at you. And Nightfall just has a much more polished one. So Factions maybe is not the best place to start for a new player, in my opinion, unless you really want to make an assassin or a ritualist first as like your first character. I would generally recommend Nightfall or Prophecies, not Factions, for your very first character, for your very first experience. Nightfall, they really figured out the tutorials, and the pacing is a lot better, and it's a lot more comprehensive. It's the most comprehensive tutorial. They explain a lot of different mechanics there. So I think that one's like really well done. Oh, another reason why you might want to pick a specific campaign is appearance. I'll just quickly show you. It doesn't really matter, but the options for like faces and hair color and even skin color to some extent are a bit variant. So like if I go back and go into factions and I click warrior, you can see that like some of these hairstyles are a little bit different and some of the faces are different. Some of the skin tones are a little bit different. And then if we go and you can also see Factions has the Assassin and the Ritualist. If you want one of them, you have to go in there. And I love this character select art. I am going to take a moment to take a screenshot of this. And then Nightfall. Here you can see Paragon and Dervish. These are the professions that were released with Nightfall. So if you want to start one of those, you have to go here. But you can again see skin tones are a little bit different here. There's a different set of faces, different sets of hair. Way more hair color options, interestingly enough. So some of your character customization options are a little bit different depending upon which campaign you start in, which is a reason why you might pick a specific one over another. If that's something that really matters to you, though, there's also character makeover kits that you can buy on the store.guildwars.com that allow you to actually mix and match across campaigns, provided that's available. So assassins and ritualists, dervishes and paragons would not be able to do that, but the core 6 professions would. So that's something that may influence it. But one of the other things that people will say is Nightfall gives you access to heroes right away. I mentioned those earlier with mercenary heroes. They're very useful. I do think heroes are maybe a little overrated for a new player. And the reasons why I say that is, first of all, when you're first starting out, you don't have any skills. Heroes, so I mentioned unlocking skills earlier for PvP characters. One of the big ways that they made the unlock system matter for non-PvP characters is heroes also, like a PvP character, can use any skill you've unlocked on your account. When you're first starting out, you don't have any skills unlocked on your account, so your heroes are going to be limited. Now, when you get a hero, you will unlock skills, which is useful, but it still is going to be limited in what you can outfit them with. You also have to give them equipment. Now, there is something that is called bonus. I'll demonstrate to you. Who's somebody who probably has a fairly open inventory? I don't know. Let's just hop back on Santir. It's probably fine. Oh no, his inventory is not open at all. Okay, well, whatever. I need to put this thing away in my bank. The bank is something that you'll be able to get access to. It's just your account's storage. And I want to put this birthday voucher away because my character had a birthday, and you can see I have a giant pile of them. I'll just touch on this now since it's here. You access the bank by talking to a Shunlai storage agent. You'll get some number of tabs. You'll probably start off with 5 tabs, I think is the default. 4 or 5, something like that. And it's 50 gold to open the bank for that character, and another 50 gold to open your material storage, which normally caps out at 250, but you can buy extensions to that. So /bonus is a command that will give you a bunch of stuff. You can see it filled up my inventory. I also couldn't make more because I ran out of space in my inventory. But the Igneous Summoning Stone is really useful for your first character. You can't use it once you're level 20, but it will allow you to be able to use it beforehand. A lot of this stuff, though, is things that I have because of pre-order bonuses, so you won't get access to, like, the most of these things that I have spawned. You just, if you don't, the things that you don't want, you can throw in this trash can to delete. So your limited options there also make outfitting heroes a bit more of a pain. So that's something else that's also just worth being aware of. Like, heroes are useful, and once you get to a certain point, you can bring up with the party search window, you can find your list of heroes here. So you can see, like, here's that Mesmer I was mentioning, right? And so, like, you can customize their skill bars, which is great, but you're not going to have this when you first start out. So it takes a bit to build up your heroes to the point where they actually have a lot of skills available, and you're probably going to want to prioritize some of the better skills as you're unlocking them. So there's some considerations there. So in general, I would recommend Nightfall for the tutorial or Prophecies for sort of the lore and experience. Factions is maybe a bit fast, so if you're wanting to make like an assassin or a ritualist, that would be the main reason why I'd recommend starting there. So that's kind of a quick overview of, well, that wasn't quick at all. That's an overview of which campaigns to start in. Again, you're going to have 8 character slots, unless they change things in the future or whatever. But as of right now, a new account has 8 character slots. That's plenty to be able to experiment around, try things out, figure out what things you like. Maybe start Nightfall and do the tutorial. Now, I would recommend finishing the Prophecies and Factions campaigns before finishing the Nightfall campaign, for lore story reasons. I'm not going to elaborate on why, but that would just be my recommendation. But once you reach a certain point, you are able to go from campaign to campaign. So let's go ahead and touch on that briefly. So this is, by the way, this is the Battle Isles. This is the PvP areas that PvP characters would have access to. Probably not Embark Beach, but the other ones. Embark Beach has some other useful stuff that I'm... Like, you'll be able to go there. If you go here by accident, by the way, which is very easy to do, there's NPCs at various sort of booths. So somewhere, I don't remember exactly which one is. I think the Tyrian one's over here, and then right in front of me is Canthan, and then I think Elonian's up here. But anyway, I'm not going to talk... Like, veterans will know about Zaishin quests. When you're starting out, you don't need to worry about them, but they're a way of getting some bonus things. Talk to the travel NPC, and then you can say which world region you're in, and be like, I will help at this place, and it will take you back there. You might go there by accident if you talk to the Zaishin Scout, which has the quest marker over their head. That's something that might cause you to accidentally find yourself, shall we say, in Embark Beach, and then you're not sure how to get back. Something you obviously want to try to avoid having happen. So, let's go ahead and talk about choosing your secondary profession, which is the next thing that I wanted to talk about. Now, something that's really important to know, you are not locked into this choice, but you are at first. The reason why I say this, you can see here, I can change my secondary to whatever, any of the other professions, because this character has unlocked all of them. You are locked in for a while. So in factions, once you finish Nipui Quarter, you'll find yourself in Senji's Corner here. And you can begin unlocking secondary professions with Senji, the profession changer over here. So it costs like 500 gold to unlock a secondary the first time, but then it's free to switch after that. In Nightfall, so if I go to Commandant Jewel of Istan, it's just showing you how to get around here. It's all Winter's Day right now. they don't celebrate Winter's Day in Cantha. There's a quest that you do that takes you to... Man, this guy really is not as accomplished as you'd think for being my oldest character. That will take you to the Sunspear Sanctuary area here. And boy, it just had to spawn. You get spawned in slightly randomized locations when you map into a place. Like if you go through a zone portal, it'll be next to that portal. But if you just map into it, it's kind of randomized. But there's an NPC here that you will be able to unlock once. It's a little bit murky. There's some story stuff going on that I'm not going to touch on about like why. But you can see that there's a profession changer that I have unlocked over here that, you know, you get access. And again, I think it's the 500 fee. I don't remember. Probably. That then lets you change your secondaries. So that's still fairly early on. Then if we go to Lion's Arch, which is also going to be all dressed up for Winter's Day, one of the festivals, there's also a big Halloween festival. It's much, much later. Once you get to the Dragon's Lair outpost, this mission, and finish Augury Rock, that's when you can start changing your secondary profession. And this is a very different setup with how everything works here. So there's like these quests that you do to be able to unlock your secondary profession. So I don't know if Nowsoon will talk to me because I'm pretty sure that's the one who does it for Monk. But maybe it's the Elementalist. Oh yeah, so I can change my secondary here. So it takes much longer. It's very important to be aware of this though, because the language, last I checked, in both prophecies and factions makes it sound like your choice of secondary profession is permanent and is unchangeable. This is for lore reasons that they dropped by the time they were making Nightfall. It is changeable. So don't worry about it. So let's quickly go over like why you might want to pick a particular secondary profession. I'm going to try to be somewhat brief. Just off the top, obviously, you'll eventually be able to unlock all of the secondaries and do whatever you want. But the initial secondary profession you pick is probably going to get the most skills initially, because prophecies will give you free skills. And there'll be some like training type quests that you can take in both factions and Nightfall that will also give you skills for your secondary profession. So you're going to get a bit more of a initial startup with skills, so that initial choice does matter a little bit, but it's not like you can change it later. So some things that you might want to consider, there's a concept in the game of the hard versus soft resurrection skill. So everybody gets access to Resurrection Signet. It resurrects a party member, but once you use it, it doesn't recharge until you get an effect called a morale boost. The game will teach you about those, but there's boss type enemies. They have a glowing aura. When you kill them, you get a morale boost. When you get a morale boost, all of your skills recharge, including Resurrection Signet. There's also Sunspear Rebirth Signet that you can get in Nightfall, but it functions somewhat similarly in that it only recharges when you get a morale boost. So that's something that's really important to be aware of. Everybody can bring a one-time use Resurrect, and you have to defeat particular types of enemies to be able to get it back. Monk, Ritualist, and Paragon all have what we'd call hard reses, or hard resurrection skills, or resurrection skills that have recharges. So, for example, Restore Life that I have on my bar right now is an example of that. Resurrect is the basic one. It's terrible, and you want to replace it as soon as you can, but it does exist. Monk has quite a few of them. Light of Dwayna is another example. It's not a very good one, but Restore Life, Resurrection Chance, Renew Life. You get the idea. There's quite a few. You know what? I have this guy here. Haha. Ritualist also has quite a few, or has a couple of resurrection skills and restoration magic that you might want to consider. The common one is going to be Flesh of My Flesh, which is... I should know this. Right here. Flesh of My Flesh. This costs a bunch of your health, but it is a resurrection that you can use repeatedly. There's also Death Pact Signet, which is a risky resurrection effect, but it is one that exists here as well. And there's a couple of other more finicky ones. And then Paragon also has some resurrection skills. Under Leadership, there is Signet of Return. It is a resurrect that you can use repeatedly. If you aren't a primary paragon, you will not have access to leadership, which is the primary attribute, so it will be weaker. However, you can still use it to resurrect people. And it also has We Shall Return, which is a very potent party-wide resurrection skill, but also very expensive. So it's 25 energy. So those are the only professions, though, with hard resurrection skills. There's a finicky PvE only skill in Dervish that technically can work, so you won't see it on a hero. I guess I'm just being thorough. This is my personality, but I wouldn't really tend to think of that one. So Warrior, Ranger, Necromancer, Elementalist, Assassin, and Dervish with an asterisk don't have hard resurrection skills. So if you don't have a particular like desired secondary profession or something that you're trying to do, for example, you might want to make a Warrior Monk to get those Paladin vibes as an idea. Very common sort of traditional combination. But if you don't know what you want to do, picking a secondary profession that has access to those repeatable resurrection skills probably a solid choice. You might not always want them, but you might want them, and so it can be a solid choice. So, reasons why you might want other secondary professions. You might want secondary monk. I would not generally pick it for healing, but there are some useful support skills and other sorts of effects under monk. So monk secondaries, again, like some of these healing skills not great, but monks can remove hexes, which are one type of debuff, and conditions, which are another type of debuff. And so like being able to remove those might be something that you want access to. Other professions are able to do that to some extent, but monk has skills for it that are pretty straightforward. And there's some other potential support skills that you might want. Potentially under protection prayers. So maybe you want to do something with that. Warrior. So warrior, the way weapons work in this game, and this will be relevant in just a moment, is it cares about your attributes. So as long as you have the right attribute requirements met. So for example, I have these daggers over here. They want dagger mastery. That's an assassin attribute. Then you'll be able to wield that weapon no problem. All right, dagger mastery. So maybe you want to pick a warrior to be able to use one of its weapons. I wouldn't recommend that on a caster because you don't really want to run up to an enemy. They're all melee weapons. Hammer, sword, and axe. Of those, sword is actually very finicky and maybe not my highest recommendations, despite swords being cool. But maybe you want to use one of those weapons. There's also going to be a bunch of skills related to them. So like, attacks that use a hammer. Other reasons why you might want to use warrior. Tactics is a support line that has a bunch of potentially useful skills. There's defensive stances in here. Stance is a skill type, but there's defensive skills in here that can help protect you. There's things like watch yourself that can help make your party a little bit more durable. Maybe you want some of those, maybe not. Particularly of note, there are some attack skills in here that are melee attacks. So they work with any melee weapon, including daggers and scythes. Those are the assassin and dervish weapons, respectively. That might be useful. Healing Signet is a parity solid heal that doesn't... It's a self-heal, and it leaves you a little bit vulnerable because it decreases your armor by a bunch. That basically means you'll take double damage from things that care about armor while you're using it. But it is a repeatable healing skill that doesn't cost any energy. So that's a self-healing skill. So that's something that you could also potentially consider. And that's another reason why you might want to pick a warrior. Every profession has their own self-healing skills, but it's an option. It's something to be aware of. Something else to call out is, while you can't put points in it, sprint is actually still pretty useful, even without any strength. 8 seconds of moving a little bit faster might be handy. Probably not, but it might be. Ranger. So one of the biggest reasons why you'd probably pick Ranger as a secondary is if you want to be able to use a pet. Now, pets do use up a skill on your skill bar to bring them. You have to charm them with Charm Animal, and then you can bring them with Comfort Animal or its elite version Heals 1, and that will bring your pet with you. So if you want to play with a pet, that's a reason why you might want Ranger secondary. It's a very strong reason. You can use bows, but Ranger's primary attribute reduces the cost of skills, so a lot of bow skills are going to be maybe a little expensive. There are some useful utility skills in wilderness survival, including some defensive skills and some move speed buffs. Sometimes, like Natural Stride, they're both. So there's some arguments there for it. Poison Tip Signet can be useful for certain builds, for example. But probably one of the most compelling reasons to pick Ranger Secondary outside of pets is Antidote Signet. This is available through a skill quest. So whether or not you want to wait until then to acquire it or purchase it from a skill trainer, again, we'll talk about acquiring skills in just a moment. That's up to you, but Antidote Signet is really useful. It cleanses you of poison, disease, blindness, and an additional condition. Like, that's just really strong, and that's especially useful on other martial professions. So Ranger, Paragon, Warrior, Assassin, and Dervish all care about attacking, and being blinded means you miss 90% of the time, and that's terrible. Like, normally the hit rate is 100%, but if you're blinded, it's 10%. So being able to get rid of that is super handy. Antidote Signet is a really useful utility skill, and it's no attribute, so you don't have to spec into anything to be able to use it. We already talked about Monk. Necromancer. So Necromancer is kind of an odd sort of profession. It definitely has some really useful skills and some handy support skills. Blood Renewal is a nice heal early on for self-heal. Although it does cost some of your HP to use initially, it gives you some good health regeneration and a chunk of health when it ends. Probably the main reason why, like, I generally wouldn't recommend taking Necromancer as a secondary right off the bat. There are some skills that are really useful later on. Offering of Blood is good energy management for yourself, for example. But if you want to kind of do like a Death Knight or some sort of thing like that with like minions or something, it's not going to be great, but you can still do it. It's going to be a little weak. There's some useful utility skills. Most notably, there's Plague Touch, which works, like, it transfers conditions. If you actually spec into curses, it'll be a little bit stronger, but you don't need to make it work. Plague Sending is another skill kind of like that. So there's some useful utility skills, but in general, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it right off the bat. Necromancer is a really strong primary profession, but that's in part due to Soul Reaping and its primary attribute, which when you spec into your primary attribute, you get benefits. And so, for example, Mesmer has fast casting. That makes your spells and signets cast, or like activate faster, but it only, for non-Mesmer skills, there's some other effects. It only works on non-Mesmer skills that have an activation time of 2 seconds or more. And it makes your fast casting, decreases the recharge for your Mesmer spells by a bit in PvE as well. Monk has Divine Favor that makes your monk spells that you target allies with heal them upon target. So their heals are a bit stronger. Warrior has Strength that increases their armor, gives them armor penetration on attack skills, which is useful. Ranger has Expertise, which lowers the cost of Ranger skills, as well as a few other types of skills, such as Binding Rituals, which is a type of ritualist skill, and touch range skills. So there's some like spells that are touch range that are also affected by it. Necromancer has Soul Reaping, though, and Soul Reaping is extremely good as a primary attribute for energy management. It gives you energy when things die, but there's some limits to that. Elementalist has energy storage, which gives you more maximum energy. It's not great. Assassin has Critical Strikes, which gives you energy when you critically hit enemies. The amount of energy is based upon how much you have, but it's not as aggressively scaled as Soul Reaping. Ritualist has Spawning Power. It makes summon creatures. That includes Necromancer minions. So that's one reason why you might go Necromancer Secondary. Ritualist actually kind of works with minions a little bit. It gives them more HP, and it also makes a type of skill called a weapon spell, such as Nightmare Weapon, last longer. Paragon has Leadership. It makes skill types called Chants and Shouts give you energy back when they affect allies. And Dervish has Mysticism, which gives you a little bit of armor when you're enchanted, as I recall, and it also makes the Dervish enchantments you use cheaper. So it's kind of like Expertise for Dervish enchantments. This is probably a lot of information, so let's take a moment. Breathe in, clear our minds, absorb the information, breathe out. Okay. Elementalist secondary is a little bit clunky because it expects you to use... Like, Elementalist is a very energy management complicated profession. And it relies pretty heavily on skills called attunements to decrease energy costs. And a lot of its skills are expensive as a result. So if I switch this to a list and look at the elemental stuff, you see a lot of 10s and 15s in there for energy costs. That can be pretty hard for a lot of other professions to handle. Like you can see up here, I've got a lot of 5s and 10s with a few 15s in my mesmer spells on this character, right? So it's a little bit hard to just throw on an elementalist skill. There are some that are useful as utility. For example, Slippery Ground, you can just put enough in water magic to not have the failure chance, and then it can be a useful knockdown skill for you, for example. So there's some, and it's only 5 energy, there's some that can be useful utility, notably the Conjures, which allow you to be able to get increased damage when wielding a weapon of a specific damage type. Those can be useful for adding some additional damage, but it's definitely possible to use a few elementalist skills here and there, but it's definitely going to be a bit tricksy from an energy standpoint. However, there is a skill called Glyph of Lesser Energy, that's an energy storage, that makes your next 2 spells cost 10 less energy to cast. This is actually some really nice energy management help for other professions, so it is worth considering this skill specifically from that standpoint. So there are some other neat things you can do, but a lot of the cooler things are things that you would be you wouldn't be doing until you're able to change your secondary professions anyway. So Assassin is interesting in that it has a class of skills called Shadow Steps. So if you want to use daggers, obviously you also want to go in here, but they are pretty energy intensive. So outside of like Ranger, it's a bit hard to use them without skills to help manage your energy that you're not getting until later and after you can change anyway. So I wouldn't necessarily choose it right off the bat for daggers. But there are some really nice utility skills in like Deadly Arts and Shadow Arts that might be worth considering for like both casters and physical attackers. There's some nice like defensive options like Heart of Shadow that lets you get away from enemies and heal yourself. But there's also Shadow Steps. So Shadow Steps are a type of teleport that requires pathing to be able to successfully get to your enemy. But like Death's Charge is really useful on any melee profession because it lets you immediately go next to your target. It does have a healing effect, which is also nice, but the biggest value of this one is being able to teleport to your target, so you don't have to run up to them. It also has the no attribute skill Dash, which lets you run super fast. Normally, so there's caps to buffs and debuffs. So like, you can't increase your movement speed by more than like 34% unless a singular skill. Single skills can exceed the caps. So Dash can move you 50% faster, which is faster than most other skills can move you. So that's potentially really useful for just... And it's not long, but it's enough to like get up to an enemy, right? So that's something that you might want to consider as well as a nice little bit of utility. Ritualist does have some skills that are useful. Restoration Magic has healing effects that are way better on secondary professions than the monk's heals are. So if you want to play like a warrior or an assassin or whatever, or if you want to bring heals on your necromancer, people go to Restoration Magic. Particularly Men, Body, and Soul and Spirit Light are both notably strong. Wherever Spirit Light, this is alphabetical, so I should know where it is, but Spirit Light, this does want you, they do want you to have spirits around, whether that's binding rituals or Ranger's nature rituals, probably binding rituals. So there are some things here that can be useful. It's the hard res that's the biggest draw. Splinter Weapon is also really good, though, for dealing additional area of effect damage, and you can cast this on yourself. So you can bring this. Also, something that's worth noting, even though you can't put points in it in spawning power, there is a skill in here called Sight Beyond Sight that is, for 8 seconds, you cannot be blinded. There are some areas where enemies spam blinding skills on you, and being immune to blind, even for, you know, like, what is that, like 52% of the time or whatever it is, roughly half the time, being immune to blind can be really helpful. So that's also worth considering, even if you can't spec in it. It's still good enough. Paragon. So there are definitely some useful skills, particularly under command. Also, anybody can use spears. There's kind of a mixture of energy ones and adrenaline ones, so warrior can use spear pretty well. And so can like anyone if you want to be attacking. It's a ranged weapon, so it works pretty well, but because it's adrenaline based, it doesn't have the like, how is my managing the energy problems that you might have with bow. So spear is not like a super deep weapon. It only had Nightfall and Eye of the North to get skills in, so it's not as deep as bow in terms of like number of skills, but it can be useful if you want it as a ranged attack that like can maybe do more damage than just auto attacking with your wand. Also, command has a notable number of useful skills, such as Never Surrender, that can help support your party. And Fallback is super popular for helping you to get places faster. So unlocking this early by being a Paragon might make it a little bit easier to unlock it early, might be useful. Something to consider and be aware of. Dervish actually also, scythes are really good. Again, it's a lot like spears where there's a lot of adrenaline skills as well as energy. I mean, show them in lists, you can see the costs, I guess. So you can see a lot of these fists with adrenaline. You gain adrenaline by attacking enemies, and technically you get a little bit when you're hit. So these are ways of gaining more. But what's particularly notable about scythes is that they can hit up to 3 enemies at once instead of just 1, which is very strong. Their damage range is pretty wide, but their ability to hit a lot of enemies at once, definitely, like, that's a huge boon. So scythes are a very, very good weapon because of that. And so it might be worth using them for that standpoint. Again, I wouldn't put a melee weapon on a caster most of the time because you don't want to be running up in combat, but it's useful to be aware of. Then Wind Prayers and Earth Prayers both have some useful utility skills that you might want to consider. Things like Mystic Twister can be workable on other melee professions. Pious Restoration is a particularly notable heal. It does require you to play in with some of the mechanics, but it can remove hexes from yourself, which is really handy. And so it has some good self-heals there. I don't necessarily know the orders in which you get some of these, but or get access to them. And there's some useful defensive skills. Conviction's not bad, but the one that people really like is Mystic Regeneration, which gives you a bunch of health regeneration. So, okay, so let's talk about... Oh, and Mesmer, obviously. So Mesmer, there's a lot of good utility to Mesmer. One of the big things is it has spell-based interrupts, like Cry of Frustration, that interrupts a foe if they're using skills and a bunch of things in the area. Some of those are quite useful. It also has some hex and enchantment removal. Necromancer has enchantment removal as well as does Dervish, but otherwise you're kind of stuck. Hex removal is something that only Monk and Mesmer can do to allies. Dervishes have some skills to remove hexes from themselves. And there is a Paragon skill that can technically remove hexes from allies, but it's very clunky. Most professions don't have a good way of dealing with hexes. So you'll need to dip into your secondary for that. It also has Inspiration Magic, which is a really versatile utility line. A lot of ways of getting energy back. Drain Enchantment. Power Drain, if you get really good enough at interrupting, is also a good option. There's Energy Tap, which technically works. Channeling can work well depending upon how you're building and playing. Waste Not, Want Not can work well. Keep in mind you have to calculate out like how much you're getting based upon how much... and obviously this is at 0 attributes, so it's going to be pretty weak. And then like Inspired Hex can remove hexes and get you energy back at the same time. So there's a lot of good utility here. There's also, if you're going in areas where there's specific types of enemies that deal specific types of damage, the mantras that give you like reduced damage from certain element types, fire and lightning being particularly notable, but there's some areas where like earth and ice could be useful. Those can be handy in some areas. So there's some good utility stuff here in Inspiration Magic. Illusion Magic also actually does have some use as well. Distortion can help protect you a little bit. It's a little bit wonkier. There's not as much that I'd necessarily be looking for if I'm playing secondary in Illusion Magic, but some of the stuff can be useful. So yeah. Whew. All right. Secondary professions. Let's talk about acquiring skills. So I've already talked about skill quests a bunch of times. They are quests that give you skills. You can do them and get skills. Yeah, that's sometimes you'll have a quest that gives you skills before you do the quest, and sometimes it will give you skills as part of the reward for doing the quest. But either way, they will give you skills. Unlocking skills on your account allows you to use them on heroes. It also allows you... I think I should have one lying around in my bank. There's something called tomes. They come in elite and non-elite varieties for each profession. So like this is an elite elementalist tome. So if I go elementalist and activate this tome, I can acquire any of these skills using this tome for this character. The skills available here are skills that I have unlocked on my account. So if you haven't unlocked a skill, it will not appear in this list. Because I have all skills unlocked on this account, these are all elementalist elite skills in the game. There's non-elite versions that will also, like this is an assassin tome, for example, that I happen to have lying around. This will allow me to be able to acquire any non-elite assassin skill. Again, they have to be unlocked on my account to show up here, but this is a useful way. I don't think... So one of the big uses is that this is just like, once you have the tome, the skill is just given to you. One of the other main ways that you acquire skills is through... Let's go... Ember Light Camp? No, let's just go to Ascalon City. So Ascalon City is going to be all dressed up for the holidays, but we can enjoy that too, right? So I'm going to just change my secondary profession to something like Ranger, sure. So over here, there's Sir Bertrand. He's with skills. Now, skill trainers have a limited availability of skills. It's not going to seem like that when I talk to Sir Bertrand, but I'll explain that in a moment. So this is the main way that you would acquire skills. It will cost you 1 skill point and some money. The amount of money starts off at like 50 gold or something, but it increases each time you buy a skill until it caps at 1 platinum. Just to quickly cover it, money, 1,000 gold is worth 1 platinum. We usually say 1k. I'll talk about some money stuff a little bit later. But skill tomes do not cost skill points or money. So, depending upon how you're doing things, you might be getting tight on skill points. You'll definitely be getting tight on money starting off. So that's a way of acquiring, like, skill tomes can be useful, but they have to have already been unlocked on your account. So buying skills from skill trainers is one of the other major ways of acquiring skills. The one thing that I want to note, however, is that so you can look up a skill on a wiki to see where it's acquired. Not all skill trainers have all skills. Skill trainers will offer skills from that campaign that are unlocked on your account, regardless of what their normal stock would be. So normally, Sir Bertrand would not show a complete list of Ranger and Monk skills, for example. He would show a limited selection of the things that he already has available or that you already know from having unlocked on your account. So that's a really important distinction and something that's significant to be aware of. You will potentially want to find a skill trainer that has a skill that you want. For example, when I first started playing, there is an elemental skill called Meteor Shower that I learned about. And I really wanted Meteor Shower. But obviously, this guy wasn't selling it. So I had to find my way far enough into the game to get to the skill trainer that would teach me Meteor Shower, and I was very excited to go get it. Also, you can see here it says unlocked when you have a skill unlocked. Known if you have a skill known. These are always going to say unlocked for me because I have all skills unlocked on this account, but or at least at the time of this recording. Maybe they'll add more. That would be exciting, but we'll see. Anyway, so if you don't have a skill known or unlocked, that means that you can like buy it to unlock it. But that's like skill trainers are a significant way of acquiring skills. And when you get to a new town or outpost, it's not a bad idea to check the skill trainer to see if they have new skills available for you. That said, I would usually, if you're trying to conserve money, I would check to see, am I going to get the skill through skill quest later by looking up the skill on the wiki to see if it is where it's acquired. And if it's acquired through a skill quest, or look at the list of skill acquisition quests to see if it's acquired there. If it's acquired through a skill quest that your character has access to, I would tend to do the skill quest rather than purchase it to save yourself money and skill points. Okay. There's another very significant way of acquiring skills that's really important to talk about. So let's go to LA and talk to Magic Malacquire. Ah, yes. Dating this as a Winter's Ice thing. So Magic Malacquire, there's going to be a quest in each campaign that gives you access to this. But Magic Malacquire will teach you how to get Signets of Capture. Signets of Capture allow you to get skills from bosses. This is a really cool mechanic in the game where you have to hunt down specific boss enemies. Is there a good spot to show you bosses? I'm trying to think of if there's any areas that I know immediately off the top of my head. I know there's some bosses right outside the Eye of the North, but they might be a little tricksy to get to. I mean, I do know some spots, but it's like, how late do I want to go? Well, okay, I know a spot in outside Sarlacc Sanitarium where there's a typical boss spawn. I'm okay with just Daedalon here. I don't know why he had Vengeance. We'll give him Resurrect. Okay, so I'm going to be super over-leveled for this area. That's just how it goes. So boss enemies, and I'm not going to like show the actual trying to capture things, but you activate a Signet of Capture when you at the corpse of or like near a corpse of a boss enemy, and you can permanently replace that Signet of Capture with a boss skill that your character does not have. This is the only way to acquire elite skills, which are the skills with these gold borders. You can only have one elite skill on your bar at a time, but they tend to be more powerful, and therefore, or like, they're typically useful. They might be more powerful versions of other skills. They might have more other things going on. So here's an example of a boss enemy, Anani Mokmok. Over here, I'm probably going to be able to kill this guy just by attacking him, but because I am dramatically overleveled for this area. But once you've killed the boss enemy, you can then use a Signet of Capture and acquire any of the skills they have. And it doesn't have to be an elite skill, by the way. There are some skills that you can, and particularly in Prophecies, acquire earlier if you kill a boss enemy to acquire it, because it is available later. Yep, there's a monk boss over there too. So you can see different bosses. Finding bosses and hunting them for their skills is a pretty significant thing. So it's a really cool part of the game. So that's one of the major ways of getting them. I kind of want to talk about, I'm going to pick up my loot here. Something I'm going to touch on just because it's convenient. You'll see this 11 gold coins. I currently have 0 gold on this character. If I pick this up, I only have 6 gold. What happens is gold coin drops like that get split evenly among your party. So the more people you have in your party, the more it gets split and the less valuable they're worth to any individual person. Heroes and henchmen that you bring with you count as people in your party. So that's just something to be aware of. Pets do not count as people in your party. They count as allies. The last major way to acquire skills is through something that they introduced in Nightfall, which I hinted at this earlier, and that is hero skill trainers. So if I talk to... Yes, they're usually called hero skills. This will teach skills to your character. So it's not like it doesn't teach... It's not teaching skills just to your heroes. It teaches it to your character, and it will unlock it for your account if you don't already have it unlocked. But you can see that there's quite a list here. The way that you get hero skill points is by leveling up titles, such as your Sunspear title. So you can see I'm a Castellan. There's also, you get them in Eye of the North by leveling up titles there that are associated with the different factions. But this allows you to be able to acquire skills for any profession, and when you switch to that profession, you'll have that skill unlocked. You do not, like normally with a skill trainer, you'll only see skills for your current professions. But hero skills, now none of these will be elite, obviously. The only way to get elite skills is with an elite tome or by capturing the skill directly. But you can acquire skills through this. So, for example, as a monk elementalist right now, I can learn these ranger skills by acquiring them through this. And again, this will teach it to your character and unlock it on your account so your heroes can use it. It's a really useful system for being able to do that. I probably have some of the ritual skills, so they're not showing up as many in this list, etc. So, you know, I'm not going to look at all of them. Sunspear skills are skills that are PvE only. They do not unlock your account on your account. They're just for your character. But some of them are quite useful. The warrior one is especially useful for melee attackers. It's called Whirlwind Strike. I guess I have it on this character, so I can show you. Yeah, right here. It attacks in an area of effect. Attack target foe, or target and adjacent foes, and it does for some additional damage. So very useful, especially for sword. This is its only area of effect, like attack. I know that 100 Blades can also hit in an area, but we're ignoring that. So this is, but you can use this with any melee weapon, including daggers and scythes. So it's quite useful. There is actually one additional way that you can unlock skills, but if you're not interested in PvP, well, it's through PvP. So if we go to the Great Temple of Balthazar, yes, Priest of Balthazar. Rewards, the rewards one. So when you do PvP, you get something called Faction. It is specifically Balthazar Faction, and you can use it to unlock skills. And they'll unlock it for your account. It will not teach it to your character. It will only unlock it on your account. However, if you get an elite tome and you want to get a specific, or if you get a tome and you want to get a specific skill, and you've done some PvP and gotten some Balthazar Faction, this is a way that you can acquire that skill, sort of indirectly. So this will also make it available to your heroes. And you can see the red text warning. You will not learn the skill, but it will be available for any of your PvP-only characters and heroes. I believe... I don't remember how much faction it is. It's either like 1,000 or 3,000, and I don't remember because I haven't looked at this system in ages, but this is technically another way that you can unlock skills. However, it does not acquire them for your character directly. But it's useful to be aware of. Okay. Now, another thing that's useful... The next topic is making builds and being part of a team. Frankly, I have made a whole video about making builds for Guild Wars 1. I'm just going to link that in the description so you can look at that video. There are definitely considerations. One of the things that you want to think about is, like, how are you distributing effects across your team? So I'm just going to... The article also has some of these stuff that you can look into. So just some very brief things. How are you distributing healing effects? How are you distributing, like, interrupts? Who's doing damage? Things like that. What sort of cross synergies do you have? Like, things that work across characters. That's something that's really significant. The skill system is very card game based. It's inspired by Magic the Gathering. And so it has a lot of that sort of like trading card game, like deck building roots in it. And so you might want to consider specific strategies. So, for example, if I add this ranger on here, who is apparently doing assassin stuff, but that's not what we're looking at right now. There is a skill here called Ignite Arrows. It does fire damage when it hits foes, right? And it does it in an area of effect. They explode with fire damage. Then there's an Elementalist skill. So if I grab Acolyte Sosuke, there is a skill here called Mark of Rodgort. I'm just using this as an example because it's a pretty straightforward one, and the enemies use it right here. Mark of Rodgort. Yes, Rodgort is Trogdor backwards. And this says target foe and all nearby foes are hexed with it for a while, and whenever one of those foes is struck for fire damage, they're set on fire for a while. Fire does a lot of damage, so you can combine these effects to have Mark of Rodgort on foes that then your rangers are exploding with their arrows to set them on fire. It's a simple combo, but you can think of synergies that way, and that's something that's useful to be aware of. So again, if you want more stuff about making a team build, I have a whole thing there. Energy management. So this is a really important consideration, and this is kind of a complicated one in some regards. So energy management is all about managing your energy bar. You can see down here, I have a blue energy bar. It's, by the way, if you want to change your user interface, I haven't talked about this. I want to bring it up, but you can change your user interface down here, or in the interface tab. You can change your controls over here as well if you want to remap buttons. But the interface, I've moved the compass to an unusual spot, things like that. So you can move stuff around. But energy management, I'm going to go to my guild hall. This will give me PvP versions of skills, but that's okay. So energy management is the way in which you are managing your energy pool. So there's a couple of really important considerations here with your energy. Your maximum energy is not energy management, right? So energy management is about how you are handling your energy over time. And there's a lot of things to consider there. So the first thing is 1 pip of energy regeneration restores 1 energy every 3 seconds. So if you have 3 pips of energy regeneration, like a ranger does, you'll restore 1 energy each second. And that means that you'll want to consider sort of your throughput with skills. So there are different skill types. Signets do not cost energy. So if you bring a signet, it allows you to be able to get an effect without having to worry about energy costs. Unless the signet is one of the ones that makes you lose all of your energy. But, you know, if I'm caveating everything, we'll be here all day. And it's already going to be long enough. So what sheesh, it's been an hour. So the things that you're going to want to consider for energy management are typically going to be the cost of the skill. So adrenaline skills also do not cost energy. They cost something else. And that's a resource because you accumulate it from attacking. Helps like keep going in combat rather than getting worn down. Things that give you energy back. So I mentioned it earlier, but the Necromancer skill, Offering of Blood, restores just a raw amount of energy. This will help you manage your energy by giving you energy back now, immediately. There's also skills like Blood is Power that allows you to give another ally energy regeneration. There's also, probably don't have it on this character, but I will check. Yeah, Offering of Spirits gives you energy. It's just a variant on Offering of Blood. I don't remember what attribute this skill I'm thinking of is. You know what? Congratulations, Daedalon. I'm looking it up on you. It's called Spirit Channeling. It also gives you energy regeneration, but it might be Communing. Or it might not be, or it might be Spawning Power. Yeah. This gives you energy regeneration. So there's skills that give you energy regeneration. There are skills that reduce energy costs, like I mentioned with Glyph of Lesser Energy. Elementalists in particular use skills that are attunements that reduce or like refund energy. And this also refunds a little bit of energy or of restoration. So there's some skills like that that can help with that. So you're looking for like skills that give you energy back. But one of the other things that you want to look at is just what is the energy load of your bar? So like if your skill bar costs a bunch of energy to use, that can be a problem, right? You don't want to be loading up on high energy skills unless you have a way of like managing that energy. So 10 energy is kind of getting expensive. 15 is quite expensive. 25 is ridiculously expensive. Think about the math, right? If it takes you 25 seconds Or most casters have regenerate a little bit energy a little bit faster. They usually have 4 pips. But 4 pips of energy regeneration amounts to 1 1/3 energy a second. So like if you think about, I don't want to do the math right now, but if you think about the amount of energy that, or like how long it takes 25 energy skill, like to recharge that 25 energy, that's going to take a while, right? Even with 4 pips of regen, it's going to take a while. Your maximum number of pips for regeneration, by the way, is 10. You can't go above or below that. So if you go -10 to +10 is the caps on both health and energy. And so you can't go beyond that either way. Health is 2 health per second, by the way, either direction. So anyway, a skill like Jamie's Gaze is a really potent heal, but it's 10 energy. I can't use this very often, or I'm going to run out of energy very quickly. This has a 3-second recharge, which means it's available pretty regularly. 3 seconds is a fairly short recharge. So it's very available, but the problem is you'll run out of energy very quickly if you're just spamming this. Now, the usefulness of this skill is it is a strong heal that is available when you need it most of the time. The downside of it is if you over-rely on it, you're not going to have any energy to heal anyone with. So you want to make sure you're not relying too much on high energy skills, that you're mitigating with signets, potentially if they fit into your build. So energy management is partially done in the build phase. What skills are you using to help manage your energy? And they're partially in the play phase. So for another example, Heal Party heals your entire party for a chunk of health. It costs 15 energy. Its stats are a little bit different in PvE. 2-second cast time and 2-second recharge as opposed to these numbers, but it's 15 energy either way. If you use it to heal one person, it's really inefficient. If you use it to heal 2 people, it's kind of inefficient. If you use it to heal 3 or more people, it's efficient. So it's a question of how efficiently are you using your skills. So if you use like Jamie's Gaze to heal somebody who's taken like 30 damage, you're wasting a lot of your energy, right? So it's also in how you play the bar. Now I'm talking about monk stuff because that's what I have up right now, but this applies to anyone. Keep in mind, it can be okay to just sit there and regenerate energy and just auto-attack. That is a valid option, particularly on people who are not keeping the party alive through their healing spells. So monk is like one of the, or like healers are the most intense energy management professions. There's some more advanced stuff that you can do with energy sets that we're not going to talk about here. But there are some more advanced energy management things you can get into. One of the things, though, that you really have to be careful about when making builds for heroes is they're not going to be smart about managing their energy. They're just not. And so you're going to want to be very thoughtful about how you're making their bars. As an example, this is a really good one, actually, because it's so important. There are a couple of monk skills for removing conditions. There's Mend Condition, which has a 2-second recharge. It removes a condition from an ally, or from another ally, so you can't target yourself, which is a downside. But if it's removed, it heals them. This one, Mend Ailment, can target yourself, and it heals for each condition left on the ally. That's not what's important here. What's important here is 5-second recharge versus 2-second recharge. If you're in an area where a lot of conditions are being put on people, Mend Condition can actually be a huge downside because they're going to spend a lot of their time and energy removing conditions. Having them, which is not like, it's an okay heal, but it's not necessarily the best heal. It might not be what you want them to be doing. So using Mend Ailment, which has a longer recharge, means that they won't use the skill that as often. This is where you can also run into problems like Jamie's Gaze. Heroes don't know that this is a sometimes skill. They'll use it all the time and run themselves out of energy. So you just have to be really thoughtful about what skills you're giving to heroes for energy management reasons. And it's just something to be very, very aware of. So energy management is a really important part of the game. Yep. Okay. Energy management. Let's talk about target prioritization. So this is about prioritizing targets. Which enemies do you go after? So I'm not going to talk specifics. It's a good idea if you're really struggling in an area to look at a couple of things with enemies. The first one is what are their builds? You can look these up on the wiki, and you can get a sense for what skills the enemies are using. That can be really useful. Another one, and just in terms of like specifics, another one is there's a couple of spots, I think particularly in the Hell's Precipice and Tanakai Temple missions, where there are trigger spots. You're walking forward and then you hit a spot. It's an invisible tripwire, and it says to the CPU controlling the enemies, go this way. And being aware of those spots, keeping an eye out for that can be helpful, just for what the enemies are doing. Enemy target prioritization. There is no like aggro control exactly. It's like there's a concept called body blocking where you can't walk through each other if you're enemies, and so I think party members can, but if enemies, you cannot walk through each other, so you'll get stuck on each other. So standing in their way of their melee attackers can help with some of that, but that's also really relevant if you have melee attackers in your party. Like, I don't know. This is not a good spot because these are PvP heroes that are henchmen that I never add to my party. But like if I'm going to Lion's Arch, let's just go to Lion's Arch, and I go to henchmen, and let's say I want Little Tom in my party, right? So Little Tom uses an axe. He wants to hit people in the face. If I am targeting an enemy that is in the back of the group, he's going to run around trying to get to... Maybe heroes are especially bad for this. Maybe henchmen are not quite as bad, but... he's going to run around trying to figure out how to get to that enemy and not actually attack anything. So you want to kind of be aware of how what you're targeting affects the CPU-controlled characters in your party. But figuring out like what enemies are doing what. So some of the things to look out for. Enemy healers. Usually you want to prioritize enemy healers. Yeah, aggro control is what I was talking about. So usually they will target the person with the lowest armor or the lowest health. Like they'll prioritize like the closest to dead person. So you can't like super well control where they're going. So one of the things that you might need to look out for is, do they have a bunch of melee attackers attacking your backline, right? Attacking your casters. You might want to focus on those, because those can sometimes really wreck your team composition and how your team is working. You might have a high priority target, like an enemy elementalist. They can sometimes be extremely dangerous, and so prioritizing them can sometimes be a really, really important thing to do. So that's something to be looking out for. The other thing is, are there skills that you want to specifically try to interrupt? Your AI companions are really stupid, right? The CPU-controlled characters. I always want to call them AI, but that's gotten friggin' complicated as a term lately, and that sucks. But anyway, the CPU-controlled characters can be really, really stupid in the sense that they have really good reflexes, but they don't know how to prioritize targets. You have to do it if you're not playing with another human. So that means you need to be scanning enemies for skills that you want interrupted, so that way you can direct them to do it, which you might want to do, right? For example, areas where there are enemies that cast Meteor Shower, maybe you want to stop them from doing that because it's going to destroy your entire party. It certainly can if you're not paying attention. But yeah, a lot of times you're going to want to focus like on healers. Casters tend to be squishier, so you might want to take them down quickly. But sometimes you need to take down melee that's in your backline. So prioritizing targets, there's a lot of like paying attention to things and figuring out what is the most important thing to stop here. Sometimes the enemy healing professions like monks or ritualists can heal, they're not always healers. Maybe they have really bad bars and you can ignore them, right? And it's more important to go after their damage dealers. Sometimes you're not going to get anything down if you don't go after their healers. So you'll just have to kind of like pay attention to skill bars, pay attention to what's going on with the battlefield. That's some stuff about target prioritization. I also want to talk some about armor. So armor in this game is a little bit non-intuitive. And what I mean by that is it doesn't work like a lot of games. A lot of games you add your armor values together, right? So you have... so you can see all of my things here are armor 60. it is not... I don't have 300 armor. Each piece has 60 armor. And this is something that took me a while to learn because it's different from other games. Like, I'm used to, like, say, a Souls game where armor pieces are cumulative, right? Like, if you're playing Elden Ring, or I think even Guild Wars 2 works this way. Like, I'm not positive on that, but each piece contributes to the whole. But here, each piece is individual. And I don't know if there's some, like, wonkiness with certain skills. For example, there's a ranger bow attack called Pin Down that cripples you. I don't know if that specifically targets your feet. Crippled is a condition that halves your movement speed. So there might be some skills that specifically target specific areas, but in general, there is it's broken up in eighths. There's a 3/8 chance that your chest will be hit, a 2/8 or 1/4 chance that your pants will be hit, and then the other three parts all have a 1/8 chance of being hit, so that's 12.5%. So this is going to be reflected in a couple of things. One of them, actually, if I travel back to Lion's Arch and walk over to the armor crafters, which are over here. So maximum armor, by the way, for a caster is 60. There's different values, and they also will give you like energy regeneration and stuff. That kind of feels like a class feature. But as you can see here, the chest pieces cost 6 cloth to make. The hand pieces cost 2, and the pants cost 4. This is pretty typical, where the costs are increased for the chest pieces because it's hit more of the time. It's a more important armor. And so that's just something that you're going to generally see, is that the cost kind of reflects that proportionality. Another significant thing about armor, with a slight asterisk, the only way of getting armor is to make it at crafters. So this is one of the big things that you need crafting materials for. You cannot acquire armor as loot from enemies. They will drop, like, armor pieces, I say in air quotes, but those armor pieces are only good for salvaging. We'll talk about that when we talk about acquiring materials in just a moment. It's the next section. I need to take a break to drink, because I've been going nonstop. Okay, so... yes, so each armor piece has a chance of being hit. This is also relevant with primarily the insignia system. This is going to be easier to talk about in my guild hall. So if we go to the rune trader, we can go look at some insignia. This is an easy way of acquiring them. So insignia, like Survivor's insignia, gives you more health. But if we go to like Monk, for example, Wanderer's insignia will give you plus 10 armor versus elemental damage. It only applies to the piece of armor that you apply it to. This is really relevant. So for example, when I first started playing, I didn't understand this, how it worked. So I made an armor piece with Hydromancer's insignia, another with Geomancer's insignia, another with Pyromancer's insignia, and one with Aeromancer's insignia. It was a little bit different when I first started playing. We're not going to worry about those details. But I thought, I will just spread my coverage, right? Plus 10 versus each element. No. It's plus 10 versus that element if that piece is hit. Okay? So super important. Things like shields that give you additional armor, like this one will give you 16 armor, but it needs 9 motivation to be able to do that. That applies globally. So if you have things on your weapons that give you additional armor, that applies globally. But for your armor pieces, that applies to that specific location. So if you're putting an insignia on your armor, like say you want the Knight's insignia, well, if you want to... Wow, they're sold out of Sentinels. Anyway, if you want to reduce the physical damage -3, it has to be on that piece, right? So that's just something to be aware of. If you use Stonefist insignia to increase your knockdown time by 1 second, caps at 3 seconds on Warrior, you probably want to apply it to something other than your chest and legs, right? Because otherwise you are making yourself potentially more vulnerable. As a consequence, things like Radiant that gives you additional energy, or Survivor that gives you additional health, do have greater effects on leg and chest armor rather than the other pieces, because you're taking you're reducing your potential armor in those spots. Also, it's worth mentioning, every 40 armor halves or doubles the damage that you take. So if you lose 40 armor, you're taking twice as much damage. If you gain 40 armor, you're halving the damage you take. The specifics of the formula, just for those who are really curious, there's something called the strike factor. I'm not going to go into details there, but it's that minus armor level divided by 40, and 2 is raised to that power. So there you can look at the wiki page for the armor formula if you want more details, or damage formula. I forget what they call it. I think it's a really neat formula, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So that's something that's useful to know. Your armor, you probably also want to apply runes. Runes are an important part of this game that increase, like, they can do other effects. So, for example, there's a warrior one that reduces your damage. This applies across your character, not just to the piece it's applied to, unlike the Knight's Insignia. And then runes also can increase your attributes. You can only apply runes. So, like, these are the general runes that you can apply for any profession. These other runes and insignia only apply to armor of that profession. So that's something to be aware of. If you want, like, right now I have a superior rune of, and your headpiece always gives you +1 to an attribute, by the way. Runes also are non-stacking, so this superior rune of healing prayers is giving me +3 to my healing prayers. This minor rune of healing prayers is not doing anything right now because I have the superior one on. If I change my armor pieces around, so that way I have, say, superior smiting prayers, now this rune is applying, right, and taking effect. So it's usually a bad idea to stack multiple superior vigor runes. Runes come in 3 strengths: minor, major, and superior. And you can just see the effects themselves. Minor increases the attribute by 1 with no other sort of effects. Major increases the attribute by 2, but you lose 35 maximum health. Superior raises it by 3, but you lose 75 maximum health. Usually, if I'm making a build, I'm only going to use 1 superior or 2 majors to minimize my health loss, but it's up to you. You don't want to get your health too low, though, because you'll die a lot. So it's usually a bad idea. There's some, like, specific farming builds that work otherwise, but yeah. That's more of a niche thing. So runes are really important for, like, making your, like, getting a little bit more effectiveness out of your build or hitting breakpoints. So as an example of a breakpoint, if I go back to Necromancer, there's this skill right here, Blood is Power. I'm going to lower my Divine Favor so I can raise that. You have a limited number of attributes. We'll talk a little bit about some stuff related to that later. So this is currently 3. If I bring this up to 3 blood magic, now this is 4. And if I bring it up to 8, so right now at 7 it's still 4, but then at 8 it's 5, right? And then I can't get this up to +6, but it will hit +6 if I could get it to 13. Because I'm a monk, I cannot. So that's a little bit about the significance of hitting breakpoints. Sometimes you're just making your skills better, but it does mean that primary professions can use their skills better because they can use runes to get their attributes higher, up to +16, or up to a rank of 16. Okay, I think that's the stuff that I wanted to say about armor. There is one specific armor-related new player tip, however, that I think I will fit in right here, that I want to talk about, and that is Ascalon City. If you're playing Prophecies, this is one of the earliest cities that you'll get to. And when you get here, you will see there's Benoit and Corwin that make armor. If we go over to Benoit, this guy makes armor fairly cheaply. It has 15 armor on this caster. And it's 20 gold and like a few cloth, right? If I walk over to Corwin and I look at his armor, he's charging a bit more, and it's 30 armor. In fact, you might remember, this is as good as what you saw in Lion's Arch. Lion's Arch is a substantial way through the game. So I would generally recommend, like, obviously this is more expensive. It's not, like, terribly more expensive. I would generally recommend going for the armor that Corwin makes, rather than the armor Benoit makes. He also offers, I don't know why you'd ever purchase this one. He also offers ones that have some plus attributes, which is nice. So yeah, that's just something that's really useful to be aware of. Corwin makes the good armor. Benoit makes bad armor. This sort of feature doesn't apply to the other campaigns. They're structured differently, but useful to be aware of. Okay, so let's talk making money and acquiring crafting materials. So the major way of acquiring money in the game is picking stuff up. Like if you collect your loot, you can sell it. It's generally going to be more valuable than the stuff that you just leave on the ground. Or than the gold coins that you pick up off the ground. I already talked about that a little bit. There's also something called an identification kit. Identifying things, so like right now this is just 5, armor 5, that's all I know about it. It's a white item though, it doesn't have any special properties. If I go over to the merchant, this is going to be a really bad example because it's only worth 3 gold. If I identify it, it will be worth 6 gold. You see how the value doubled? I don't know the exact math on this. I believe doubled is sort of the maximum. It was not worth it to do it with this identification kit, but if you go here, you can see you can buy an identification kit for a regular one for 100 gold, and it has 25 charges, so it's 4 gold to identify something. So once stuff starts getting a little bit better, and not like literally the start of the game practically, it's going to be worth a bit more, and it's generally going to be worth it to identify your stuff before you sell it, because it's going to make it worth more. That's something that's really useful to be aware of for making money. This ornate Grawl necklace, so it's a trophy item. I can trade it into somebody called a collector. This is the asterisk on acquiring armor. There's some armor that you can acquire through collectors. So like this is somebody that's a collector. If I talk to her, she wants char hides and she'll give me belt pouches or fur squares. This is actually a good way of getting fur squares. So save your char hides. Trade them in for fur squares. But I'm not sure if there's some special collectors going on for the holidays, like this person who's not labeled. But trophy items can be salvaged. Some of them are worth it, some of them are not. Some of them are just good for selling. I like to salvage these because plant fibers are a valuable crafting material, which brings me to another point. Salvaging stuff with a salvage kit is how you get crafting materials. You can also purchase them from the trader or directly from players through the trade function, but the trade function can be kind of clunky. And if some of these crafting materials can be quite valuable, plant fibers, feathers, like look at the traders to figure out which. Crafting materials do come in common and rare varieties. Rare crafting materials are generally worth more. So, and these are like per individual item. So you can see the first squares I'm talking about. You can buy it for 230 gold or trade in 4 char hides for 1. Obviously, these traders will buy things for lesser prices than they're worth, than they sell them for. That's how markets work. And sometimes they can run out of stock on stuff. Usually you're going to see that on runes and insignia and stuff more than crafting materials. But so yeah, if you want to have money, picking stuff up is really useful. Identifying stuff is really useful. Some quests will give you money. Something else that's also really good is it's like salvaging stuff and selling materials you don't need. Like wood is up right now, so the base price that they sell things at is 100. So when things are more than 100, that might be worth some value. And the more it's up, the more it's going to be, worth it to sell it. Especially to them rather than to the merchants. And that's also like salvaging stuff is the way that you get them. It's also worth talking a little bit about salvage kits in particular, because they come in a few varieties. But I need a better merchant to talk about that. So regular salvage kits can only get common crafting materials out. That's all they're good for. Expert salvage kits can get common crafting materials, sometimes rare crafting materials. This is the best way to get steel, aside from purchasing it from the rare materials trader. And they can also upgrade, or like remove upgrade components. So for example, this is a poisonous Greater Guardian Spear of Fortitude with a Brawn over Brains in it. I can remove those components with an expert or superior salvage kit. Superior salvage kits is the same thing as expert salvage kit. You just pay a bit more to have more charges, which saves you inventory space. I wouldn't get superior versions of kits when you're first starting out, unless you are getting them through trading things to NPCs. There are some spots where you can do that. In fact, let's go to Kaineng to talk briefly about that. So like these Imperial Quartermasters are an example of what I'm talking about there. But expert salvage kits and superior salvage kits do have a chance of breaking the item that you're salvaging from. There is another salvage kit that is available through Eye of the North called a perfect salvage kit that only has 5 charges. It will not break the thing you're salvaging from. You can salvage freely from hero armor, by the way. It does not break. So this guy right here will give me a superior salvage kit if I bring 5 Imperial commendations to him, or to her, I guess. I can get an expert salvage kit for 3. So I would generally do this one to get superior salvage kits. You get these through doing quests. So that's a way of doing that. So like this guy probably has a quest. If I did this quest, well, not that one. Some of them do and some of them don't. Give those commendations. So the Afflicted Guard, yeah, this will give me an Imperial commendation if I do this quest, as an example. So, and you can also get gold from quests. Prophecies will have primary quests that give you weapons that you can identify to dramatically increase their value and sell. A lot of times they are dubious, though you can use them if you want to. So that's another way. Another really important mechanic. So Kaineng Center, once you get here, you're able to get quests that allow you to be able to go to other world regions, including Eye of the North. Reasons why you might want to go to the Eye of the North: you can go there once you're level 10, and you can get heroes and max level, like that are max level, and you can get max level armor going to Eye of the North. But there's a mechanic called storybooks. I have one right here, but written evidence, an empty copy of the storybook. Doing missions fills up the storybook. Completely filling it up allows you to be able to turn it in for rewards. The rewards vary depending upon which campaign and which storybook, and there's some specifics about that. But that's another way of getting money. Just playing the game will get you money over time. But you're going to be pressed. You're going to want money for armor. You're going to want money for skills, especially. Like, that's going to be a huge spot. So, and early game areas don't reward money very much. You need to get to slightly later areas to start getting it. But Kaineng Center allows you to be able to go to different spots. So this right here will take me to Boreal Station. This is where you go with Eye of the North. And just like at the very start, there's a little quest that you can do that teaches you about controlling heroes. If you do that, then this guy, you'll get an item that you can trade to this guy for a max weapon. They are not very good, but they are better than a non-max weapon. And you can also craft maximum armor here. The selection is very limited, as you can see. And you can also see that maximum armor is way more expensive than non-max armor. That's just how it is. So that's just something to be aware of. Prophecy's pacing makes not having max armor longer fine, and you'll be able to like get like it's the pacing with it actually works pretty well. Let's see. Other things about getting money. I definitely remember I had some thoughts. Zaishin missions Zaishin quests can help a little bit. A lot of it really is picking up your drops, identifying stuff. One of the big things I always look for is if I get an armor drop off of an enemy, they can have runes and insignia on them, even if they are blue. So rarities are white, no special properties. Blue, which has a special property, so that can have like minor runes on them if it's a white or if it's a blue armor. Otherwise, it won't generally be as good. But then there's purple, like this is purple. So you can see this is not max, but I don't care because this is not for damage. But purple is the next rarity, and then there's gold, which is the highest rarity, and then there's the like side rarity of green. Green stuff, with one exception, always has the same stats. So they are called unique, which is ironic because they're not unique. But they always have the same stats. This is a Shield of Hierophant. Always same stats, same appearance, all that sort of stuff. You can dye armor, by the way. I'm not going to talk too much about the dye system. I might touch on that briefly. But one of the things I always look at when I get an armor is I identify it, if it's identifiable, and I check to see, is the value that I expect the rune to be able to sell for. So like Healing Prayers is probably going to sell for 600-ish gold, maybe 600 or 700. But if it's up a little bit, like this might, Anchorites there's a good chance that I had salvaged an anchorites out to try to get increased value if that value is higher than the value of the thing. So like one of the things that you might run into, these always actually buy for 200, the superior runes. So whoops, I hit close instead of cancel, but whatever. So you can see like this is always for 200, so don't get fooled by that. So there's a good chance that the armor, like if the superior rune is worth like 100 gold, the armor is almost certainly going to be worth more if it's gold than selling the rune would be. You can identify runes, so like if I get an armor that's worth like 17 gold or something like that when I identify it, I'll salvage the rune out, identify the rune, and then sell it, and that will increase its value because traders don't buy things for less than the merchant would. But that's also like selling runes and insignia are also a really good way of making money, but it is a lottery. And you might want to use it yourself. That's also something to be aware of. But you might like hit a shaman's insignia and get like this is worth 21 platinum, and you could probably sell it for like 17 or 18 platinum to the merchant or to the trader, and suddenly like, oh, now I can afford a bunch of skills, or I can afford to get that armor or whatever. So that's something to be aware of and to think about as well. It's definitely tricky making money early game, and or like when you're first starting out your account, and then really the biggest tip is like pick up your loot, sell it. Once you start getting like actual loot, like when you look at the merchant, if the loot is like worth 20 gold or more, like that might be the time when you might start consider identifying, especially if it's worth like 40 gold or more. Definitely identify it before selling it. Get your characters further into the games. That's really one of the big things to getting more money. Like there's nothing like starting off, you're just going to be getting loot that's just worth less. It's not worthless, but it's worth less than later in the game. So that's just one of the big things to just be aware of. Okay, we're in the home stretch. Some miscellaneous tips, tricks, simpler stuff. Maybe some more complicated stuff. Some stuff I've already talked about. So I'm just looking at my thing. My article. I'm just going to go over these. Okay, so this concept of fleshiness. There are some enemies. Actually, there's a really easy spot to demonstrate this. And a really easy way to demonstrate this. So if I go to the hot springs here. Sorry, you don't. No onsen episode here. But if I switch over to assassin, do I have jagged strike? Chances I have jagged strike are like. Apparently, I do not. Well, that would have been great for demoing this, but I don't have the skill on this character. I can switch to another character. You know what? I can just... Okay, let's just do this. It's not ideal, but it's what I got going on. Okay, this is going to be like a very crude demonstration, but there are certain types of enemies that don't have flesh. Usually skeletons or like construct type things. So if it's like made out of rock, you might see an elemental. If something is not fleshy, that's so like these skeleton rangers up here. I'm just going to put a healing skill on myself so I can try to demonstrate this without dying. So if I hit this guy with this skill that applies bleeding, you'll see target is immune to bleeding, no flesh. So fleshiness has a few things that you're considering with it. It is immune to the bleed, poison, and disease conditions. These are all health degeneration conditions. So bleeding causes 3 pips of health degeneration. Disease and poison both do 4. Disease will spread when you get close to something that is the same species as you. That might not seem super relevant, but Ogden the Stone Healer, for example, is a dwarf. So if he gets disease, he will not spread disease to your human party members. So it is not relevant. It's just a little specific. So things that aren't fleshy cannot be affected by those conditions. That can be particularly relevant, like Sword really cares about things bleeding, or it sort of does. So maybe you don't want to use a sword in an area where there's a lot of enemies that are immune to bleed. Or maybe you want to like build it in a way where you don't care about, where you're not trying to inflict bleeding. Acolyte Jin's build right here is using Jagged Strikes and apply poison to try to put a lot of conditions on foes. This is a build that like would not work against enemies that aren't fleshy. Enemies that aren't fleshy also do not leave exploitable corpses when they die. So Necromancer minions require a corpse. You can't make a minion out of an enemy that doesn't have a corpse. There's also well spells and a few other spells that exploit a corpse. You can't exploit corpses if enemies don't have them. So that's just something to be aware of. There's, yeah. Like I said, skeletons, elementals, djinn. There's just a variety of foes, and the article kind of goes into it a little bit more, that are just immune to, like, those conditions, like I mentioned, and can't be exploited. So maybe don't bring a minion master. It's a necromancer that makes a lot of minions. Guild Wars 1's equivalent of a summoner, I guess you could say. Don't bring one of those if you're going into an area where there's not going to be a whole lot of exploitable corpses, for example. I mentioned this a little bit already, but buff and debuff caps. So just to quickly go over these, individual skills can exceed these caps, but if you combine skills, you cannot. So there's an attack speed cap of 33% increase and 50% decrease. So, for example, there's Necromancer debuff effect. Oh yeah, here's an example of a well spell, or exploits nearest corpse. There's a couple of Necromancer curses. Shadow of Fear and Meekness. So Meekness makes all foes in the area attack 50% slower. Shadow of Fear also does the same thing. This has a larger area of effect. That's the biggest difference between these two, and along with like the costs and stuff. You can't stack both of these skills and make enemies like attacks at 25% speed or something like that. It caps at 50% decrease. And then movement speed has a cap of 34% increase and 50% decrease. Again, individual skills can exceed this, like with dash. And armor buffs from skills cap at plus 25. I think there's some finickiness with that with some weapon mods. So if you really care, look at the details. And there's some other caps. The article I mentioned has a wiki link to effect stacking that will, and it's wiki.guildwars.com/wiki, I guess. But anyway, you can get to it from the help menu. But there's more. I already mentioned the regeneration caps, but just to kind of go over that again, you actually saw it earlier. Let's go to the Isle of the Nameless, better place for demonstrating this. The Isle of the Nameless, by the way, is a useful testing grounds for your skills. There are things to test things on here. You'll like combat dummies, for example. So you can see suit of 100 armor, so you can see how much damage you do against a 100 armor target. So like if I wand that, see I'm doing like 11 damage. If I hit the 60 armor one, I'm doing more damage, roughly twice as much on average. You can also see area of effect ranges, so nearby versus adjacent in the area. These are all different area of effect ranges. There's also things where you can look at conditions. So I haven't really talked about conditions, but you can look at them all here. Let's just quickly go over them. Disease, like I said, gives you some health degeneration, and it will spread to creatures of the same kind when you're next to each other. Poison also gives you dazed, makes your spells take longer to cast, and they're easily interrupted, which means if you take any damage, so you can see the healing burst bar, like activation time when I'm affected by dazed, and if I walk out here and it and it cleanses, now you can see the activation time is a lot faster. Weakness makes you deal less damage and decreases all of your attributes by 1. So this was at 13 and 16, and now it's down a little bit. It decreases the amount that you have invested into it. So you'll notice my protection prayers is not down. If I click it up, it is now decreased. So if you're not spec'd into it, it won't decrease it. It's kind of a weird one. Poison is just straight health degeneration. So health degeneration caps both ways at 10. So if you're at like negative 20 and you apply a skill to give somebody like plus 9 health regeneration, it's still going to be negative 10. And it goes the other way too. You can't stack it above 10. And this is 2 HP per second that I'm either losing or gaining. This is a skill that applies regeneration to myself. And energy regeneration also caps, and that, like I said earlier, is 1/3 of an energy per pip. So at 10 pips, you're getting 3 1/3 energy per second, which is pretty good. Blind makes you miss most of the time. Crippled, as you can see, makes you move slower. Burning is just 7 pips of energy degeneration, or 14 HP loss per second. Bleeding is another 3, so if I apply Healing Breeze while I'm bleeding and burning, you can see I'm at -1. Deep Wounds decrease your maximum HP. This takes it off the top. This takes it off the bottom, not off the top. So what that means is it doesn't just decrease your maximum health, it decreases your current health by the amount that it decreases your maximum health by. It also reduces the healing that you receive. The exact amount that it functions by is a little variant. And what I mean by that is it's 20% or 100, whichever is less. That takes off. Cracked Armor, it reduces your armor by 20, but it won't reduce it below 60. So those are conditions. But this is a great place to test stuff out. And so that's a little bit of an overview of regeneration and degeneration caps as well, and kind of what that looks like. Degeneration can seem kind of strong, but direct damage is often usually better, so it's how you want to play. There's pluses and minuses to different styles. There's a concept called overextending, which is when you move away from the rest of your team. This is something to be particularly aware of if you have shadow steps and you're a melee attacker. It's very easy to find yourself away from your support casters, like your healers, and then you're surrounded by enemies and then you die. Another problem of running back into the back of enemy lines when you're on a melee attacker is if you're playing by yourself with heroes, you'll notice they follow me around, right? They're trying to keep pace with me. And one of the things that'll happen is if you are, I want to go attack this guy, and you're running up to it, you can drag your whole backline into the enemy. So that can put you in a really bad position and make things like a really messy formation. It actually does matter. So it's something to be aware of, and it limits your mobility, right? Because you're not if I walk up to this NPC, I can't walk through them. See, I can't I'm bouncing off because I can't walk through this. They're an ally, but I can't walk through them, and so that body blocking effect limits your mobility. Because I can run through these guys, right? I can run if I tell them to stay still with this flag, learn about controlling heroes through the quest that they have to make you do that. You see, I can run through them, but I can't run through an enemy. I'm body blocked. So I'm stuck here. I can't it's trying to move through these guys, right? It's finicky. You can't quite do it. So it limits your mobility to have your groups interlocked, and that makes you more vulnerable potentially to area of effects and all sorts of things. So that's just something to be aware of. Let's see. Some useful... I just wanted to bring attention to some windows. This map that you can bring up, I call it the U map, it's the mission map. You can zoom in and out on it. It will show you with red dots where you have been, which can be quite useful. You can pan it around as well across the whole world region that you're so the battle isles is small, so that's all here, but you can pan it around, you can zoom in and out, and shows you where you've been. This is quite useful. You have this view with your inventory, so I could swap to other bags, right, and swap through my bags with this. This is what's brought up when I hit I, or if I go into menu and I hit inventory, right, well, that just toggle it off. That's what's brought up. Equipment packs are something that you can get later. It can only hold equipment. They're quite useful, but they're more of an advanced thing that you'll want to save up for. But if I hit F9, it brings up all of my regular inventory bags at once. So if I go over to this, it will close that, right? If I hit F9, it will swap over to this view. But it's really useful to be able to see all of your inventory at once. And again, this is inventory bags right here. It is a menu option. This menu does have all these things on it. You can see the mission map right here as well. If you're wondering what Observe is for, if you're in a town or outpost, you can observe PvP battles. Yeah, that's what Observe is for. I already talked about customizing the interface and controls. This is some gamepad stuff that I haven't looked at all because it's new and I play a keyboard and mouse like I'm always used to. You can change your the pre-game scene is the character select screen. There's some options here that you may want to look at as well, actually. Locking compass rotation, maybe you want that. Disable mouse walk like I have. So if I turn this off and I click on a spot, my character will pathfind to it. If you have disable mouse walking on, you can't do that. So that's useful. And there's some other stuff. Yeah, do not show skill tips on skill bars. I don't know why you'd want that. So you can look through these options, and the wiki will probably give you some more details. Show ally names and items. I usually have this off. Holding down Alt will show those. Holding down Control shows enemies. Bunch of graphics options. I know you can look through those things yourself. Something else I just want to mention: some players will unfortunately attempt to scam. I haven't really shown trade interface. I don't really have a great way of showing it. But if I go into a town and click on another player, you can see this trade icon. I'm not going to click it, but it would bring up a little window of like 7 slots. It lets you trade items and money with each other. The gold cap for trading is 100 gold. That's really useful to be aware of. 100 gold, or it's 100 platinum, excuse me, not 100 gold. So 100 platinum is a limit. Because of that, players will use other things as currency, like adjacent stuff. So first of all, when you're seeing prices, like if I go to Commandant is the main trade hub. So if I go over to Commandant Jewel Vistan, there will be, and I go to the party thing and I go to players, there'll be a bunch of people doing trades. So if we look at some of these, we will see, for example, and everybody's selling stuff in ectos and arm braces. Is anybody... Oh yeah, one of the ways of making money, by the way, is Gifts of the Traveler. You can only get some, like, I forget how many it is an account. You can only get so many on an account per week. So players who want more will buy them. That's actually a really good way of getting money. They will usually buy ecto. Ecto is a rare crafting material. A is short for arm brace. You'll also see people call them arm or arms. This is something that you get from an end game area in Nightfall called the Domain of Anguish. And it's useful for getting stuff. Here's somebody... Okay, so 100k. K is platinum. It's just... I mean, people are using it short for 1,000. A is arm brace. Arm brace of truth is the full name. And that's a thing that you can trade for some cool weapons and some other stuff. But it's also used as a player trade currency. So have a greater value than ectoplasm. I'm not really sure what it works out to be, because that's not something that I look at. But if you see a cost that has an A on it, that they're talking about arm braces. E is short for ecto. And so these are used for alternate currencies. Those are the main ones. You might see like Z or Z coins. These are referring to Zaishin coins that you get from Zaishin quests, and you can get some good stuff with them as well. So they come in copper, silver, and then gold varieties, and you can exchange them or like upgrade them for a little bit of gold in Embark Beach. Maybe Great Temple of Balthazar as well. This is a perfect salvage kit, by the way. But yeah, so those are some things that people use as like alternate currencies. If we go to the rare crafting person, which is on the other side of the outpost while I talk about things, I have ecto in my bank. So you can see ectoplasm right here. Looks like this. It's a blob of ectoplasm. But there are some things that players might want that they will attempt to spoof with other items with similar things. Wow, ecto's only 3.3 plat. This is really low price for ecto. Ecto's typically been like 6 plat, so I don't know what's happened that's made it so cheap. Wow, less than obby shards. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the game's economy, which can be wonky. So ectoplasm, 3.3 is super, super low for ectoplasm right now. Probably a good time to buy more, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Your bank, by the way, can hold up to 1,000 platinum in your vault. So people will need to like do conversions to convert from money to other forms of currency. To things like ecto that can hold value. Obviously, though, that's subject to market forces. But yeah, beware of scams. There's a lot of things to try to help you avoid them. Mousing over the items and not just assuming it's correct is a good practice to avoid it. Some things that you might be scammed on: destroyer cores. You need 250 of these suckers. in order to be able to get some really cool gloves that make your hands look all magma-y. This same icon is a trophy item that is dropped by imps just outside Lion's Arch. That's worth nothing. So you kind of double check. Again, they've done a lot over the years to try to make sure that players can't scam each other or to make it a lot harder, but you do need to be vigilant just in case. Not saying to doubt everyone, but... okay, the final thing that I have in this to talk about is kind of an interesting, like, gameplay thing that you'll notice if you're playing a ranger or otherwise have a bow equipped. Is especially the time you'll see it, but you can see it with other ranged stuff. And that is dodging, straying, obstructed, blocking, and missing. So these are things that can happen with attacks. Blocking is something that can happen with skills. For example, Guardian is a protection prayers skill that gives a 50% chance to block attacks. It's usually percentile based. And if an attack is blocked, it only applies to physical attacks, not spells. But if an attack is blocked, it does nothing. It doesn't hit. If an attack misses, it does nothing. Again, that only applies to attacks. It doesn't affect spells. Usually that's blind that's causing things to miss. But there are some other things, like... I am scrolling to my Elementalist. Blurred Vision right here gives a chance to miss. They'll also do nothing. Dodging, straying, and obstructed are actually a complicated little interaction with bows. So if I go to character select and I hop onto a ranger, such as this character is a ranger, this is going to be something that's really hard to demonstrate, but I will do my best. Let's just target some Grawl outside Sarlacc Sanitarium. Okay, and do I have... That's a longbow. So there's a bunch of different bows that have different properties. Shortbow has the shortest range and different flight times. Longbow has long range. Hornbow has some armor penetration but slower attack speed. In general, recurve bows are the most accurate. There's 5 varieties of bows. Short, recurve, long, flat, and horn. Flat bows have a higher attack speed, but they have a longer flight time, so they are less likely to hit. So if I just attack an enemy with this bow, it'll probably instantly die because I'm level 20 and it's level 3. But if I attack it, see, yep, see, it just dodged right there. So dodging can happen when an enemy is moving, depending upon how its movement is going. And that can cause the attack to fail to hit. Now, there's also obstructed. So right here, it moved around enough that that no longer applied. Basically, if there's an object between you and your target, you'll be obstructed. It's pretty straightforward. It can be a little fiddly, particularly on bridges, but like this is probably an object. So bows also have different range depending upon your height. So that hit... Well, there it got dodged, and then I was blinded. So that obviously did not work out well for me in my demonstration. This guy is insisting on being up in my face, so... Oh, I've targeted myself. And then I got myself knocked down. Anyway, my point is, dodging can happen, and it's going to be more likely with a flat bow. Recurve bows and short bows it's going to be a lot less likely with. Let's get this guy out of here. Oh, he dropped me a frost artifact. I will pick it up, and then I will sell it for like 3 gold. Ranged spells can also be obstructed, dodged, or stray. So dodged, basically there's an algorithm that the game uses when you fire. It knows how long your projectile is going to be in the air, so it can use that to calculate where it thinks the enemy is going to be, and then it attempts to shoot an arrow where they're going to be, right? It automatically leads the target. If they change their course after you fired the projectile, it will miss, and that is called dodging. So there's an advanced tactic where you kind of like move back and forth to try to make that happen intentionally to cause them to lead inappropriately. Obstructed is when something's in the way, and then you get stray. That is when the place where the target is headed is going to be obstructed by the time the projectile hits them. So it's like they weren't obstructed when you fired, they are going to be obstructed, and then it strays. So it's basically the same thing as obstructed. Dodged, though, is just useful to be aware of. That's something that can happen. And like you're going to see it with some range stuff sometimes. If there's an area of effect on it, so like ignite arrows makes my arrows explode, right? We talked about that previously. Yeah, bows deal more damage shooting like down, and they have more range. Shooting up, they have less range and deal less damage. But so that's like I'm having to run up to the scroll. If this was dodged, then it might still deal damage if they're in range of the explosion. That might be particularly relevant for elementalist stuff. That might like be a projectile that targets an enemy but has an area of effect, like Fireball. The Fireball spell is like that. So that's just something to be usefully aware of. There's so many other things that I could potentially talk about. This has been an absurdly long video already. So I hope that people who watch this have found something useful. And I do thank you very much for watching it. And again, the wiki is your friend. If you want to know more about, I don't know, ignite arrows, if you want to know like what attributes it does what damage at, just click on the wiki. Click on the wiki link and get the intel. Lots of ways to look stuff up. Highly recommend it. So thank you all for watching. And if you want to review stuff and you'd rather do it in text form, like I said, the article is linked below. So until I see you next time, thank you all very much for watching. Take care and goodbye.